When I was just a goo goo gaga infant only age 8, my parents made the mistake of getting me a Gamecube for my birthday and alongside it, 2 games. Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX 2 and Super Mario Sunshine, and unbeknownst to them, that would lead to crippling video game addiction. Despite not actually being able to beat the game until I was an early teen, Mario Sunshine became one of my favorite and most played games. Now almost 2 decades later, I get to re-experience this adventure on Switch through the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection. This is Super Mario Sunshine, Gamecube vs. Switch. Aw, fuck! I don't have cans on my desk. Super Mario Sunshine was Nintendo's second attempt at bringing their iconic mascot to the third dimension, 6 years after Mario 64, and expectations were high. The game takes place on Isle Delfino, a tropical island akin to resorts in places like Hawaii and the Bahamas, but with enough variety in its levels that it can't be pinned to just one location. Upon landing at the Delfino airstrip, Mario and company are greeted with a large goopy mess, and upon attempting to clean it up with our new pal Flood, it's revealed to be a creature of sorts. After the beast is slain, Mario is apprehended by Delfino police and brought to trial. Apparently someone matching Mario's description has been terrorizing Isle Delfino. And after a display that can only be described as Kangaroo Court, Mario is charged with cleaning the entire island. The poor guy didn't even have a lawyer, he was just represented by Peach, and the judge didn't even listen to her.
I judge the defendant guilty as charged.
Now that I think about it, I think this game means that Mario is like canonically a felon. I mean, the judge never even absolves the charges at the end of the game. The poor dude might get his plumber's license revoked.
Oh no!
Now that we're released into the Isle for some open world community service, I can finally compare and contrast the 2 games. Alright, so this one will be pretty obvious. Of course, the game looks better on Switch. Updated textures and higher resolution images look great on an HD TV, though some areas tend to lag a bit as a result of the emulator. Just so people know, I am playing on an actual GameCube with Mario Sunshine to get as an authentic experience as I can that an emulator just can't provide. There are a few issues with the sharper image, however. The way the goop on the ground is dissipated looked pretty good on CubeShine due to the low resolution making it seem more spread out. But for Switch Shine, the almost jagged edges of the puddles are somewhat distracting because they were more apparent in contrast to the ground beneath. Also, there would occasionally be objects popping in and out of the distance once the player was in a certain range, which usually goes unnoticed as they would only be a few pixels big in Cube Shine. But for Switch Shine, it's a different story. Honestly, after about an hour of playtime, most of these issues weren't even that distracting anymore. And you can't talk about a Mario game without mentioning the music. In tandem with the way the levels are constructed, the music amplifies the feeling of atmosphere the player gets from each area. Rico Harbor uses harsh and almost mechanical samples with a resounding trumpet lead to amplify the feeling of an industrial or factory locale. Serena Beach uses calm and slow, almost Hawaiian instrumentals to give the feeling of a relaxed beach/resort, with the combination of synth pads to give it an almost sci-fi feeling of a haunted motel. Pina Park uses an almost ragtime sounding upbeat versions of the classic Mario 3 map to create an exciting atmosphere, like being a kid at the circus. Shinobu Nogata did some masterful work composing for this game and even went on to compose for the Brain Age series of games and more recently helped compose Animal Crossing New Horizons. I also remember being a kid and being blown away by the fact that there was bongos added to any song in any level when Mario rides Yoshi. Well, that's how the game feels, but how does the game feel? Sunshine feels pretty good to play. It has a wide variety of movement options despite missing the long jump from 64 that's become a series staple. Switch Shine pretty much feels the same as Cube Shine, the only difference being that the water pressure isn't decided by how pressed the trigger is, but a separate trigger altogether. Additionally, the button mapping has changed as well. Both A and B are used for jumping, while X and Y are dedicated to hopping/sliding and switching flood nozzles. For some reason, they changed the over-the-shoulder aim to R3, which feels a bit unnatural and difficult to switch between. Also, because of the way the Switch interprets GameCube controller inputs as Pro Controller, you're better off using the Joy-Cons, or better yet, a Pro Controller, as the button mapping is completely off. Like, the left trigger is what the Z button used to be, and now Z and the right trigger are 2 different water pressures, and A and B button are both jumps, so you can't aim or ground pound. It's honestly just a mess. You think a simple solution to this would be to remap your buttons, but there's no such feature. I mean, you think there'd be an easy way to implement that considering that it's an emulator, and button mapping comes standard. I'd even settle for a control scheme option that allows the player to switch between Pro and GameCube controllers just to make things easier. Also, in the control list, it doesn't mention how to do the shotgun blast. On GameCube, the player would just hold down the trigger and jump, but on Switch, the player needs to hold down the full pressure trigger and jump. I spent the first 2 hours of this game thinking that I just couldn't do it, and then pulled it off by accident. But besides that, it's pretty much the same game. I mean, I tried a few of the easier skips like Bianco Hill Skip and Mecha Bowser Slide, and they still seem to work as they did in Cube Shine. The reason I went on such a tangent about the control scheme is due to my love of Sunshine's game feel. As far as game feel goes, Mario Sunshine falls just behind Odyssey for me in terms of how good it feels to control Mario. The amount of movement options he has alone feels really good, but in addition to the FLUDD system, it becomes a whole new thing. Most people use FLUDD to extend their jumps or save themselves if they fudge one, but players who use it for more than a safety net tend to get the best results. Mario is at his fastest when he's sliding on wet ground, can be saved from fall damage with just a quick hover nozzle tap, and when jumping during high water pressure, he can cause a shotgun blast effect that cleans a massive area in front of him, like I mentioned before. These are just a few examples of the way FLUDD integrates with Mario's pre-existing movement options. Eventually the maneuvers become habit the longer one plays, so when the control scheme is changed between two versions, that's where the problems arise. That's all I really have to say about the controls. I just wanted to state the fact that Sunshine's game feel inspired the way A Hat in Time was developed, and that's just another one of my favorite games that I'll always take the opportunity to mention when applicable. Like, they even have a dive button. Most modern Mario games don't even have that anymore. Like, seriously, pick it up if you haven't already. It's a lot of fun. But where Hat in Time is pretty consistent through and through, Mario Sunshine is very hit or miss with its levels. I find the floodless and challenge levels, like Red Coins, the most fun, as they're just pure platforming skills, while my least favorite levels are definitely the boss levels. Most of the bosses in this game require a lot of waiting for them to open their mouths and then spray water on them, which would be fine, I guess, if we weren't fighting the same boss upwards of 4 times. At least PD Piranha changed more drastically, and the King Boo fight only occurred once, but still, it's mostly waiting for the boss to do something, quickly countering whatever they do, and then right back to waiting. The most engaging levels require the most input, which is why making your player wait to deal damage is counterintuitive. My solution to this problem would be to have the opportunity to strike a boss ever present, but the player's ability to do so requires a task. Let's say the Goopy Piranha plant was located in the underground sewers beneath Delfino Plaza, and in order to defeat it, the player would need to locate which grate it was coming out of in order to spray and defeat it. Now, the bosses are normally placed right on top of the mission areas, and defeating them is how to remove it and unlock the new level. This can still apply, only the writhing mass of goo simply stays the way it is until the head is defeated. That's just one example I can think of how to improve player engagement and make boss fights more interactive. The only boss I believe was done well was the final showdown with Bowser. Mario wasn't shooting rockets or waiting for him to open his mouth, the player just had to ground pound on the edges of the pool to defeat him. Skilled players could accomplish this in just minutes, which in and of itself is a reward to the player for their ability alone. With that said, there are a number of levels that are just beyond redemption, and if you're familiar with the game, you'll know what I'm about to mention. Episode 5 of Pianta Village, The Secret of the Village Underside. As it turns out, the secret is actually just the worst level in the game. It's the Chuckster level. In order to beat this level, the player needs to speak to the right Chuckster at the right angle in order to get thrown into progression. There's no test of skill or ability, you just talk to someone who progresses the level for you. If you're lucky, that is. Sometimes it feels random if you're speaking at the right angle, and if the player is just a few pixels off, they're tossed into the void with no chance of redemption. I can't even think of a way to make this level any better, and honestly, I think it just should have been scrapped. Also, there's another infamous level that I just have to mention, the Sandbird. A lot of people have difficulty with this level, as the whole point is to traverse a giant flying sandbird collecting red coins sprinkled across its wingspan. I dislike this level not because it's difficult, but because it's boring. Honestly, after collecting the 7 red coins on its back, the player just has to wait for it to fly high enough to reach the 8th and final one. At that point, the bird turns completely sideways, which is where most players find themselves sliding off, but if they just position themselves next to a protruding sand block, it's really not that difficult. The way I would have made this level would have been some kind of race through a course that ended on the sandbird's back with the final coin. I found, and especially when I was playing this as a kid, that this level is particularly frustrating because the player doesn't have any control over the sandbird's movements, so their death feels unfair and out of their hands, while a course akin to a floodless stage would work better. These two levels are just some examples, but I wanted to talk about them because they're required to beat the game. There are a number of levels that just suck if you're trying to 100% the game. In order to face off against Bowser, the player needs to chase Shadow Mario in each stage, meaning that the previous 6 levels in each stage need to be completed first, as opposed to the amount of shine sprites the player has obtained like in previous games. But let's move on from talking about level design. Even mentioning those Chucksters make me feel like my skull is dented inward. The games have the same story, so I don't really have much to compare here. I'll just summarize. If you're worried about spoilers for an almost 20-year-old game, just skip to here, but if not, take my clammy hand on this Sunshine adventure. So let's pick up where we left off from earlier. As mentioned before, Mario's being accused of not only vandalizing the island, but scattering the shine sprites from the Shine Gate, casting the plaza into darkness, and is tasked with returning them to restore the sunlight. After collecting 10 shine sprites, Peach is captured and taken to Peanut Park, a theme park just off the coast of Delfino. Upon confronting Shadow Mario, he reveals a giant mecha Bowser that Mario must defeat in order to get answers. A friendly hermit shell thingy offers you his roller coaster, and Mario dispatches rocket after rocket into Mecha Bowser's metal frame. Upon defeating the mechanical foe, it's revealed to be piloted by Bowser Jr., who was running around tarnishing Mario's image and future prospects in an attempt to quote-unquote rescue his mother, who he claims is Princess Peach. This accusation causes such a shock in Peach that she forgets to mention,
hey, I didn't give birth to a horrifying turtle homunculus,
before being whisked off to Corona Mountain. And from there, Mario chases Shadow Mario, who is Bowser Jr., across every stage in the game and helps restore light to Delfino before chasing him into the entrance of Corona Mountain to face off against Pop Pop. It's not the strongest story in a Mario game, but it's a good way to place Mario's ambition for completing his tasks placed upon him by the federal government. After his admittedly horrid defeat, Bowser confides in his son that Peach is indeed not his mother. And Junior's like,
I don't care, Dad, I just want to fight Mario like you.
He's all like,
oh cool, because I need you to come with me to space. We gotta start a star reactor and steal from this observatory I just heard about. And
tragedy strikes when Mario lands. Flood is no more. But they needed him for Smash Brothers, so they brought him back to life. Gotcha! Roll credits! I know it sounds like I complained a lot, but I'm critical because I care. Can I get real with you guys? You can't see it, but I just spun my chair around and I'm sitting on it backwards just to get real. Cube Shine is like my baby. It was my first game for a home console that I could actually call my own. The first game I knew inside and out, all the tricks and techniques pre-internet. Normally at this part of the video, the reviewer would be like, 10 out of 10, it's a masterpiece, baby, but honestly, it isn't. A lot of the time, the player is struggling with the camera and the pinpoint accuracy required to complete the arbitrary levels in between the fun ones. I played this game for the better half of my childhood, so I had a long time to learn the ins and outs. The most fulfilling part of playing this game for me as an adult is knowing what to expect and overcoming it despite the game's faults, and honestly, I don't think you could put a rating out of 10 on that, at least for me. This comparison video turned into more of a review of the game's contents itself, but that's just the way it played out the more I worked on it, and honestly, I had a lot of fun making it. So if you enjoy this as much as I did, the best thing that you can do is to share it, and I will be forever grateful. Alright, thanks for watching. Until next time.